that's what prompted this. I've gone to some of the residency grand rounds and things, and also prompted Dr. Alston, who volunteered and said, hey, I'll come and talk to you guys. So he is here, not of his own volition, but really I asked him to be here and talk to us because I think it's an important topic. Everywhere I've been, spent 24 years in the Air Force, 11 years here, and invariably this issue comes up at every organization in regards to sexual harassment. And so I think it's important that we as a community recognize it and find ways to root it out of our system. And so we're going to enjoy Dr. Alston's talk today about it and see if he has some additional thoughts that he can help us. But make no mistake, there should be zero tolerance on our campus for this. And for those who have not worked in organizations, large organizations, for a long time, this will indeed raise its head, and you will likely be a leader having to address it somewhere. So I would encourage you to learn all you can about it because it will muster itself, and figure out a way to keep it out of the organizations you work in. And so as chair of family medicine, as the program of family medicine program director, twice a year, I would talk to the residents about, if this happens, let somebody know that you trust. May not be me, might be someone in the Whitehall building, might be Dr. Pizzorno, might be, Dr. Dart, somebody you trust, know that this is happening so you can get help. And we can address it for those that are making untoward advances at AL. So with that said, I won't belabor the topic any longer, but we're really excited to have Dr. Alston here. He's Associate Vice Chancellor and the Chief Diversity Officer and Title IX Coordinator at UTHSC in Memphis. He leads the Office of Inclusion, Equity, and Diversity and chairs the Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Council. And among many duties, once you get to his level, just, jobs start flying, and I won't read them all. But he got his undergraduate degree in psychology from UT Martin, got a master's in educational psychology from UT Martin as well, and then a doctorate of education from Peabody College at Vanderbilt. And he also did some additional training in diversity, equity, and got a professional certificate from both Cornell and Northwestern. And so we're very thankful that he's here to talk to us, and I'd appreciate everyone to sort of put away everything they've heard previously about this topic, listen to Dr. Alston, and then we can have a meaningful conversation and questions and dialogue. I think we need to talk about it to figure out how we together can stop sexual harassment, which can lead to even worse crimes, quite frankly. With all due respect and without further ado, Dr. Alston.
Good morning. It is still morning, right? Yeah. Or it's afternoon, isn't it? Good afternoon. It's still morning in Memphis. All right. So thank you, Dr. Haynes, for that introduction. At any point where we're talking while I'm doing this, if y'all have some questions, you won't throw me off. I'll try to answer as best I can. If I don't know the answer, I'm going to say I don't know, but I'll get back to you. So 5 things you may not know about sexual harassment. And some of these I'll read to you, but I know you can read, so I won't do that. The complainant as well as the harasser may be a woman or a man. The complainant does not have to be of the opposite sex. The harasser can be the complainant's supervisor, an agent of the employer, a supervisor in another area, a coworker, or a non-employee. The complainant does not have to be the person harassed, but could be anyone affected by the offensive conduct. So that means we can have third-party reporting. Unlawful sexual harassment may occur without economic injury to or discharge of the victim. The harasser's conduct must be unwelcome. Now, the other thing that I want you to know about the harasser's conduct, the intent is irrelevant. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So in some of our handouts that you've probably seen on our website, these are some of the examples of the categories that this may fall under. So you have physical, verbal, and visual. And over the years, I've done this a number of times where I've tried to figure out what's the best way to present this. So this is the first time I've actually started earlier on into this specificness of this particular topic. And a lot of times what we see on our campus is a lot of times people use this buzzword here when they're explaining something. And so to us, that kind of raises, one eyebrow, two eyebrows, because we don't take the word lightly when someone says they're in a hostile environment. Okay, but there are some nuances to that now, as I'll show you a little bit later, because you're probably familiar with our emails that we send out about Title VII, which is the Title VII is the Civil Rights Act of 1964, where we typically hear about, hold on a minute, in the employment environment, and Title IX covers the educational environment. So since we have residents and fellows in the room, guess what? You're covered under both umbrellas. It's just those of us that are 100% employees that are covered under Title VII for the most part, although we can offend people under Title IX. But over the years, even before the Trump changes to Title IX from the Obama era, we typically erred on the side of caution and said, hey, our residents are covered under both. Because if you think about Title IX, it says educational program. As a resident or a fellow, you're actually in an educational program. We could argue and say that you're an employee since the IRS started taking FICA deductions out of your pay probably more than 15 years ago. But before then, you weren't considered employees. So I'm not sure if you can see that, but this is something that I found from the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. And it just talks about things that are above public consciousness and things that are below as it relates to sexual harassment. And I could send this to you later through Pam, but I found this in, again, the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, and so forth. When you look at what's below, it says relentless pressure for sex, unwanted sexual discussions, rude images posted at work, relentless pressure for dates. And believe it or not, I actually just addressed one of these on campus in Memphis. Offensive sexual teasing, sexual insults, offensive remarks about bodies, obscene gestures, sabotages of women's equipment, insults to working mothers. Believe it or not, I've addressed this kind of conversation at all of our sites, not just one, but all. Gender slurs. I addressed one of those. We probably had one of those last fall, or maybe it was two. With COVID, I'm a little lost on my memory sometimes. But either way, the individual, the respondent, they were let go. And I can tell you, without sort of violating any privacy, the person that was let go was a faculty member because they made the comment to a trainee, a resident. Now, there may have been some other things going on with that faculty member that I wasn't privy to, but they were no longer allowed to be a faculty in this particular setting or with UT Health Science Center. And then up above, it just talks about promising professional rewards in return for sexual favors, threatening professional consequences unless sexual demands are met, sexual assault, rape, unwanted groping or stroking. Now, you wouldn't think, just seeing all that actually happens. We probably had all those things happen at one point or another within the UT Health Science Center across all of our sites. So what happens, the reason this happens? Well, I'm going to argue and say maybe it's pop culture. Maybe we get so desensitized to the things that we hear and see every day that the lines are somewhat blurred as to what's appropriate and what's inappropriate to say to one another, but also to a group. And I'll give you an example that's not on my slide. Probably about 8 years ago, I got a call from a department chair, not in a college of medicine. It was one of our other colleges that was in Memphis. He said, Michael, I've got this problem. I've got a faculty member that's come in And he said he was in the break room, minding his own business, working on grading some papers. And these three other faculty members came in, one woman and two males, and they started talking about this movie they had watched over the weekend. It was the movie American Pie. And he said they were talking about this sex scene, and it was really graphic. And I just wanted to close my ears because I didn't really want to hear that because I was trying to concentrate. So he said, Michael, what do I do about this? And I said, well, you've got to go talk to the three employees that were identified and let them know of the account that's been given to you by the complainant. And then you've got to make them aware that this person was offended, even though they were never part of the conversation. But whatever you were talking about was not germane to the work environment. Granted, it was in the break room, but it had no place inside the facility. There's no reason for them to have been talking about a sexually charged scene. Now, maybe all of them were comfortable, but maybe they should have taken it somewhere else and had that conversation, but someone else could hear them. So what are some other things that sort of desensitize us? Well, a lot of times we're on our phones, and when we're on our phones, we're also looking at things on social media. Maybe it's a joke we heard and we thought, well, maybe it'll be good to come back and share this with everyone in the room. But guess what? Everyone doesn't think that funny is funny. Some people may think it's actually insulting. And so therein opens another door for a problem. So the two things that keep us sort of focused are actually pieces of legislation. Now, I probably should have put a third one up there because the state of Tennessee has a law also that prohibits sexual harassment in the workplace. So the one on the red is Title IX, and the one on the right is Title VII. And the only reason I read those is because, a lot of times we send out information about training on an annual basis about Title VI, Title VII, Title IX. We're convinced, just in my office, not the whole campus, that people don't know their Roman numerals because they will take the Title VI training and they will argue with us and say, hey, I've already taken that Title IX training. You all sent the notice out and it said the UT system was sponsoring it, and I've done it. I'm not doing this other training. I said, sir, that was Title VI. Title IX is IX. Title VI is VI. Oh, okay. So anyway, not that you all needed to hear that, but I just thought maybe you'd find a little light humor in that to distract you away from what we're actually talking about. But maybe I should just keep my day job, right? So one of the things that happens is people say, well, what's the difference between Title IX and Title VII? To be honest with you, a lot of us as Title IX coordinators were asking the same thing. So the biggest difference is, one depends on where things happen. If everything happened off campus and it was not connected to the university in any way as far as an educational program, then the Title IX complaint is probably not a Title IX complaint. It actually falls under something else. But the other thing that makes them different is that when the Trump administration changed the definitions, he changed a significant word to be and as opposed to or. So under Title VII at the bottom here, it's or. So when that change happened, it meant that Title VII and Title IX no longer have a synonymous definition as to what sexual harassment is. They're actually separate. So then for Title IX to have been violated, it has to be severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive. If it doesn't meet all three of those, then it's not a Title IX violation. But if your faculty, staff, trainees, remember trainees are covered under both umbrellas, then it probably comes down here and it's a Title VII violation. Then if it's not a Title VII violation, remember, because my office isn't working as sort of a court of law or an attorney's office, we're operating under our policy, and our policy typically mirrors what the laws say. So it's probably even though it may fall under the definition of being a violation of Title VII, it ends up being a policy violation, an HR policy violation or GME policy violation, which mirrors and has the same language. Any questions about those differences? It was pretty significant when it happened because there were a lot of proponents that just says, why can't they just remain the same? Why the difference? Well, one of the prompts that came out of the changes from the Obama era to the Trump era was a lot of respondents were saying that they were not getting a fair chance. So also what came from those changes under the Trump era was this whole hearing process. So you had a chance to either say you wanted an informal process or a formal process. A formal process comes with a hearing. But again, all three of those things have to be in play. And so what we think has happened across the country is that by adding the hearing, people are opting to not file formal Title IX complaints. They just say, it's too much trouble. I don't want to go forward like that. Because what happens is you don't have to be present in the same room. You can do them through video conference, but you also have to have a representative. So what ends up happening is most people probably retain counsel. So it becomes much similar to, say, a court case. And you have a hearing officer that is appointed to listen to the whole process. So what does all this mean for you? When you look on our page, meaning the Office of Inclusion, Equity, and Diversity under Title IX, what we've said is all of our employees, even the chief residents in our residency training programs, you are all mandatory reporters. So if anyone comes to you, you have the responsibility of moving that information forward because we have some type of notice that someone has been offended or affected. And so what that means is what we'd like you to do is gently interrupt that person and say, hey, specifically if it's a medical student rotating through, you may want to say to them, I need to interrupt you for just a moment. I need to tell you that I'm a mandatory reporter. Anything you tell me, I have to report to the Title IX coordinator. So if that person has never given you the respondent's name, the person they're accusing, then you don't have to tell me that part. But you do have to tell me who the person is because you would know that because they've sort of started this conversation with you. So anything they've told you to that point before you interrupted them, that has to be given to me. The only people that can protect them are the people we designate as confidential resources. These are people in our counseling centers, people in university health services that are on campus that have professional privileges to be able to make that information stay confidential. They can also use confidential resources off campus, which we have a handout that talks about that. Any questions about any of this? So why do we say everyone? So Dr. Haynes has an admin in his office as dean, and he may be out of town. And that student may reasonably believe, or that resident may reasonably believe, even though Dr. Haynes is out of town, that person can give them immediate access to them. And so while we're saying everyone, that person coming forward to get to Dr. Haynes may reasonably believe just because they tell them that information will move forward. So it was easier for us to say everyone as opposed to certain people. So this is how the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, defined sexual harassment long before the changes with Title IX. It says unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature constitutes sexual harassment. When submission to or rejection of this conduct explicitly or implicitly affects an individual's employment, unreasonably interferes with an individual's work performance, or creating an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. So that's where those words severe and pervasive come into play. So your first offense, depending how severe or pervasive it is, could actually be sexual harassment. Then there's some instances where maybe that first incident may not be sexual harassment. It just varies. It depends on what happened. This is something that's very common. I won't read that to you. I'm sure you understand the difference between this for that and so forth. But the second one, the term hostile environment, again, the one we get most often. It says the term hostile environment refers to situations where requests for sexual favors or physical behavior with sexual overtones are severe and pervasive enough to unreasonably impact an employee's work performance or a student's ability to participate in or benefit from university programs. So when we investigate sexual harassment, just like any other organization, we're investigating from the perception of the person making the complaint. Doesn't mean it's true, but that's how we're investigating it. So then there's something called a reasonable person standard or a reasonable woman standard, which someone in a similar situation also find what that individual experienced to be unwelcome and of a sexual nature or severe or pervasive. So if it's happening every day, throughout the week, then we know it's pervasive, right? But then how severe is it? Give you an example of severe. Probably, I'm gonna say 6 years ago, one of our partners, and I'll just say the hospital, it was the Veterans Administration Hospital in Memphis. They called me. They said, Michael, one of our employees, one of our female employees, has reported that one of your residents said some inappropriate things to them at the Christmas party that we invited him to. I said, okay, is it possible for me to interview this employee? They said, sure. And we'll have someone from our labor relations sit there with you while you talk. So this person gave a very vivid account of what happened. So then I call our resident up. He comes over to the Office of Inclusion, Equity, and Diversity, and we talk. And I explain to him what's been alleged. And he essentially admits to doing it. Probably about 2 days later, I get a call from his attorney. He said, you didn't give my client all of his rights around this particular situation. And I said, well, I'm not sure what rights he had. I invited him over. I explained to him while we were talking. He said he should have had an attorney present. I said, well, why is that? Because I'm not an attorney. He came voluntarily. So anyway, that all happened. There were no witnesses, but to give you an idea of what exchanges were, she got there early at this place in Memphis where they were decorating for this party they were going to have that evening. He got there early. He started helping her sort of decorate the place. And then I think telepathically, he felt like she was telling him that she was very interested in him. But she wasn't really communicating telepathically because only Wonder Woman can do that, right? And so there was another attempt at humor, but I guess that didn't work again. So anyway, based on this telepathic communication, he tells her verbally, but in her ear, what he would like to happen between the two of them after the party's over. Well, so when the other people got there, they knew something was wrong because she just wasn't the same as far as her personality was concerned. So anyway, once the lawyers got involved, the best we could do instead of terminating this guy is he actually ended up leaving. And I guess he just went to another residency program. I'm not sure how that works. But in the interim, what we had to do was change his shift so that they couldn't come across each other. And my point in telling you that story, sometimes in having partners, they have expectations about how they want things to be handled with these kinds of concerns. And as an organization, we do as well. But sometimes our fingers or our decisions get crossed because of some extraneous things that are involved, but we're moving towards some type of resolution. It may not be as fast as we would like, because the other thing you have to remember is that in being part of a program, the individual, whether it's proven that they are responsible for these behaviors or not, they still have rights. And so as best we could, we tried to separate the two. But one day we got a call, and because that employee had stayed late and she ran into that individual. And so it started the whole thing over. And so we were able to move things up a little bit faster to get that individual out of that environment. But I tell that story to say, because the VA is probably the only partner that we have that if it's our folks that are the respondents, they give me great access. When their folks are the respondent, it's like going through a lot of red tape to get to talk to their people. We've dealt with Erlanger here. They've been very accommodating. We've dealt with Region 1 in Memphis. We've dealt with Lebanon in Memphis, Methodist, St. Thomas, all very accommodating. But for whatever reason, you would think that a federal agency that also is bound by Title IX would also give you that openness. But saying all that to say, none of this, no matter who the partner is, what the organization is, there's always going to be some difficulty in trying to get to the end. It doesn't mean that we're dragging our feet or we're being indifferent to what you've reported. It's just complicated sometimes. So top examples of sexual harassment in the workplace. Anybody guilty of that first one? Would you believe we've had people say that before? Sure we have, often. What about number two? All the time. Whether it's people that work as healthcare professionals, or it's someone that works in the maintenance department, or if it's a contractor we have on campus. When a person asks another person about his or her romantic experiences, that happens a lot. When a person insists on talking to others about his or her own romantic experiences. We've had faculty to do that in a classroom where the people have been held captive, right? When a person tries to get others to talk about a picture, movie, or song that's sexual in nature. We had a custodian that worked in our College of Dentistry in the evenings, and he would see this young female student doctor, and he would always start singing a song every time he saw her. She always wondered about that, but it was always the same song. So one day he got the courage up to tell her why he was singing the song. He was singing it to her. So you know what she immediately did, right? She reported it. And based on what we could prove, that person was terminated. So think about the songs that you probably have in your head sometimes over the years. Maybe like if you're a Prince fan and you hear one of his older songs like Little Red Corvette, that's not really talking about a Corvette. You hear the song Pink Cadillac by Bruce Springsteen. That's not really talking about a pink Cadillac. Even a song that talks about stalking, like the James Blunt song, Beautiful. If you've ever read the interview of him on that song, he's really actually talking about stalking. He's not really talking about a beautiful woman that he missed out on. And he tells you, people played this song at wedding. Did they not really listen to it? The song's not a love song. It's a song about stalking. And our Title IX policy actually addresses stalking. So what about examples of sexual misconduct? Here's the fun part, okay? Oh no, y'all got some restrictions here, don't you? All of them are restricted. Let's see if, oh. Okay, so I'll just go back and tell you what happened. How about that? What if you go out of the presentation to the internet, will they work? Nope. All blocked. Okay. So this is the first one is a movie from the Pink Panther with Steve Martin. And he's being told that he should not comment on a woman's body, right? And That's essentially the piece where we should never comment on someone else's body, whether we think it's welcome or not. And so he's been given a lesson on that. A real very educational clip if you've never seen it. So this next one was, can't let you see it long enough, but it's David Schwimmer, who used to play in the movie, TV show Friends. He created a series of videos for this organization called RAIN that addresses sexual assault, sexual misconduct. And so he's in his office late one night in this particular story, and he's looking for something on his computer and he can't find it. So he asks his assistant to help him. And when she helps him, he's just like amazed that she was able to find the documents. So she tells him if he's done with her, because they both stayed late, she's going to get home. And he said, well, how are you going to get home? He said, well, I'm just going to ride the train. And he says, no, I'll take you. And so he insists on it. And then they start having a little small talk. And then all of a sudden he makes a move and he kisses her. And she pushes away real awkwardly. And he said, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that. And so she said, I have a boyfriend. He said, oh, don't worry, I'm married. And so anyway, long story short, he said, it feels like something's wrong with that happening. And she said, no, I'm okay. Nothing's wrong. He said, but no, I really don't want anything to be wrong. I don't want this to be hanging between us. And so he insists that before they leave for the night, that she tells him that everything's okay. So eventually, just to get out of there, she says, everything's okay. So he said, okay, let's just make sure everything's okay. We're going to hug each other. So they hug, and then he kisses her on the cheek and she leaves. So what I was going to talk to you about that, if we saw that, is what actually just happened there. So we had an unwelcome advance, right? We had a situation where there's an inherently unequal relationship. He's the boss, she's the employee. She can't respond back to him in order to say, hey, stop it. I don't like this. She can't say it in a rude way. She can't say it in a nice way. Because what? Fear of retribution. Fear that if she says something, it may not go well for her. But then the last thing that happened, where he insists that they leave the evening saying everything's okay, he kisses her on the cheek. Yet again, demonstrating the inherently unequal relationship that already exists in her mind. So the point in showing you that was to say, there'll be some situations where maybe you're working with a student, maybe you're a PGY3, PGY4, whatever your program is, maybe you have a PGY1, maybe you're an attending, maybe you're a faculty member, full professor. And there's these situations, not like the one I just explained with David Schwimmer, but maybe there's some situation like that. Give you a real example. When I first started working at UT Health Science Center in the Office of Equity and Diversity at the time, I had a fellow, a female fellow, to come over and see me. She said, Dr. Alston, we were in this meeting and I asked a question and the faculty member, this male faculty member, told me to sit your fat ass down and shut up until we get to you. So that wouldn't be sexual harassment of, like, say, body parts, but it was definitely gender-based, because chances are he probably would not have said that to a woman. And so this person, who was a fellow, not a resident, so already a doctor, from what I understand a fellow does, right? A colleague said this to her. So we went in, we investigated. I worked with the chair of the department. And one of the things we talked about was how the behavior that our attendings, our chairs, our other faculty are supposed to sort of model to the trainees. This was not a great example of this. This was also disrespectful, because it probably made that person feel like this big, right? So what ended up happening, as far as what I wanted corrected, was probably different from what they wanted to correct. So I pulled out my card, my favorite card. At that point in time, former Chancellor Steve Schwab was actually Executive Dean Steve Schwab. And this was one of the very first cases that he and I had to deal with. Well, Dr. Schwab was all over this. And so that gentleman was no longer working with our residents anymore, because it wasn't a matter of not being able to prove what happened. We could prove it because there were other people in the room. It just wasn't appropriate. It wasn't the behavior that they wanted modeled to individuals who were undergoing residency training, and they didn't want them to go out and model that type of behavior, that type of interaction, interprofessional communication with someone, say down the road, if they decided to become attending physicians or program directors and so forth. But they also didn't want the other residents that witnessed that to think, well, this is what this is going to be like over the next 3 or 4 years. So this one, maybe it's going to show. No sound? Wait, maybe I can get the captions to show up. So a lot of times what happens in the workplace, we use a lot of poor judgment, right? Because it goes to that whole desensitization thing. We think because it comes in through media, through the movies, through other people that we've talked to, we've heard some comedian, that it's okay to bring it back to the workplace. And so I think Sheldon just sort of gave us a great example of that. He exposed the young lady that worked with him to some objects that she really had no choice to say, no, I don't want to really see those things. But because of that inherently unequal relationship, he shared them with her anyway. Then he went on to say that three of his other colleagues had talked about these different things in their interactions with other people. So that would be the third party reporting. But again, think about this. None of it was germane to the work environment. None of it was academic. It wasn't appropriate. And so that's what we end up dealing with. We have that desensitization to actually get past. So there's one more I had for you, but I'm not thinking that it's probably going to go forward. Nope. So this wasn't about boundaries. And again, it's one of the David Schwimmer productions, and you can look these up, or I'll send you the links. This lady went in, Miranda from Sex and the City, had gone in for a checkup, sinusitis. And so the doctor ended up checking a lot of places, specifically her breast, and actually commented on them. And at the end of the clip, it actually just talks about him going a little bit, further than he probably should, and she leaving the interaction feeling uncomfortable. And the reason I wanted to show you that, I don't know that we've had, since I've been in the office, any situations like that, but I can tell you in Knoxville, in the Middle Tennessee State area, and Memphis, we've had situations where residents have been accused of inappropriately touching female patients. And some of them have gone to the point to where they've gotten attorneys. And this one example, I know the person did not finish the program. And as far as I know, which was probably a year ago, I think I still got another letter about the APA hearing that this person was supposed to have. But I don't even know if that's materialized. A lot of times when we get stuff like this, we'll get these litigation holds. But I will tell you one that was not related to medicine that happened. We had this student to decide that this patient that they were treating looked really attractive and felt like, telepathically, that they were communicating to them that, hey, I'm into you, are you into me? So after the patient left, they went into the system to get their contact information. And they called him up. The number on file was the husband's number. The next thing we know, we got this complaint in our office, and the family wants this student gone. Well, the student only had one more year until they would be through with our program. And guess what? They were married. Sent them through boundaries training, and we extended their year. That wasn't enough for that couple. I'm not really sure what happened after that. I just know we turned over everything that we had to the Office of General Counsel. And I don't know if it was a scam or what, but there was some bad judgment there by that student. But again, at least once a year, I don't think we've had one here, unless I'm misremembering, but from one of our other locations, we'll have at least one a year. And the one that was most serious was someone felt like they were examined in areas that they probably shouldn't have been. So at the end of the day, what we all want to be able to experience in the workplace is respect. We even have a policy called the Code of Conduct, talks about respect for persons, respect for others, and so forth. And most of you've heard this throughout your life. So when we think about respect, I think we also still have to think about diversity, and specifically the part in the middle, personality. It talks about our likes, our dislikes. It talks about how our views change over time. And then all the other pieces that come out of that sort of define who we are, because we experience the world differently based on these primary dimensions in the blue that affect or influence the personality we have. And then the green, the secondary dimensions, also add a layer onto who we are. So then we come in an environment like this, a healthcare environment, a healthcare organization, these things, depending on where we fall as far as our status within the organization, going inward again, back to all of this. Because we each have these intersections that are received differently. And it prompts us to perceive those interactions that we have differently with other people. So it's not an incorrect inference to say, maybe I did experience this the way I think I experienced it, even though you think I didn't, but maybe you experienced it different from me because you were the deliverer. So this came from an organization called Virginia Mason, and they had went on this campaign to sort of address what respect looks like in the workplace. And they had some foundational behaviors that they identified. Be a team player, listen to understand, share information, keep your promises, speak up, connect with others, walk in their shoes, be encouraging, express gratitude, grow and develop. But you know, probably about 20 years ago when I first came to Memphis from UT Martin to go work for Knoxville in Memphis, if that doesn't sound confusing to you, I went to hear Lou Holtz speak. And I don't know if any of you know who Lou Holtz is, but he is a retired football coach that had coached at Arkansas, South Carolina, Minnesota, coached a little while with the New York Jets. Might have left out somewhere else that he coached. Notre Dame. And he said, there's three things people want to know in a work environment. Can I trust you? Do you care about me? And are you committed to excellence? So let's say everybody's committed to excellence. What about those first two? When something bad happens to us, do you care about me? Can I trust you to be able to come to you when something's happened to me? Can I trust you to keep my confidence? Can I trust you to help me? Can I trust you to support me? Because for some people that experience sexual misconduct, sexual harassment, this is really a big thing for them. Specifically, if you're a male and you experience this, because guess what males never do? They never come forward. For whatever reason, they just don't. So let's get into more of this perception thing so you can get a real understanding of this. You know, earlier I said we get desensitized about jokes and so forth. And so sometimes we hear these things that we think they're really funny. So we want to come back and share that the next week. And sometimes we do. So sometimes back in 2010, maybe 2014 or between there, JCPenney decided to put out an ad. Say, hey, we're going to sell some tea kettles. That was the circular they came up with. So people came to them and said, hey, we are deeply offended by your attempts to sell these tea kettles. And I'm not making this up, and I'm not trying to be funny. But people told them, your tea kettle reminds us of this guy. And we think you should pull the ad and never sell them again. So every time I've shown this, I've asked people, see it? Now, do you think JCPenney was intentionally trying to do that? Probably not. I got a sign that said, please use the microphone. Sorry. So do you think that the people were trying to do that? No, they were not. And so what you look at is you see the handle on the photo to your left. That looks like the little comb over, right? The little handle on the tea kettle, that looks like the mustache. And then you have the tie, the shadow that's going down. So that's what they saw. And this was in several newspapers across the country. And so when we look at a sexual harassment complaint, we have to look at this based on the perception of the person making the complaint. It doesn't mean that it's true, but that's what we're trying to understand. So perception versus intent. It is not the intent, but the perception and impact which determines whether or not an act is sexual harassment. Any questions? I'm sorry you couldn't see the videos and hear the videos, but I'm happy to send them to you. Yes, sir.
simple, so people just call you up. That, hey, what happened? That's what we should do as well.
So you can call me or my team and we'll listen. And then one of the other things we'll do is we'll send you a document, which is our complaint form, and ask you to fill that out. I think people should do that for two reasons. One, you have to put something in writing, but two, sometimes it's somewhat cathartic. Maybe what you told me at the time, you don't remember it all, but as you write it out, but then the document has to be signed is the other reason. But yeah, we'll listen. And then most times what we'll do is sometimes people do it in reverse. They fill out the form and then they send it, but we want to have a meeting with them just to make sure we're not misinterpreting or putting our bias into what you actually mean. We're trying to really understand line by line or episode by episode of what actually transpired as you believe it to have happened. So yeah. Yes. And Pam Moon, I deputized her. She is a deputy Title IX coordinator. She doesn't do investigations. She's just, since you all are in this location, she's here to receive the information, whether you want to give her the complaint or not, or she can give you our contact information and get you in touch with us. But she's here, just like for GME in Knoxville, it's a lady named Amy Paganelli, same setup. But yeah. Anyone else?
Thank you, Dr. Alston. The one comment I'll make that I think is pretty simple. Just don't mix separate to so that's all we've got. I really appreciate you being here. And, hope you have a great day. Sorry about that video. They will work tomorrow morning. They should. Hey, Leslie.
But welcome to come over.
I can
And
take it.
Okay.
I'm headed that way.
Okay.
We're gonna grab lunch. Oh, sorry.
You drop something.
So, yeah, that's good. We'll walk down.
But we do have YouTube, so what we frequently do is record the videos up, leave the PowerPoint to have your videos like queued up, ready to go to hit play.
Okay. And that's why I was wondering if I had done that, but it still wouldn't let you do it.
Not here.
Maybe we have to have somebody come over and unlock it for us because we use those.
Gotcha.
Thanks. Sorry for stealing your scope. So hold on. I'll take this. Smile. I'll grab something.
All right.
Hey, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. It was really good. I want everything.
Sorry, I'll walk quick. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll be back in the office. I'll be here. I'll see. Yes, sir.
Okay. If I could find it again. I bet it's still in downloads.
Oh, okay.
Let's see.
Yeah, sexual harassment.
Okay, I'm gonna move it over here.
I don't know if that would have helped.
Uh,
I never.
it wouldn't.
no, Okay.
Enable content. I did that. Okay, let's see.
I didn't stop the recording.
Yeah, it said on headphones. Why is it?